Hey all, Taves here, back playing some more Planet Zoo, and I'm back in Tiguidou Zoo. So it's been a little while, we've been paused doing some work on Zimba for a bit, but we have just had a new DLC arriving, or it's actually arriving tomorrow at the point that I'm releasing this video. So the Oceania pack, Oceania? I don't know how you say that. Anyway, it's Australia and New Zealand and the South Pacific. So, yeah, I thought we'd come back to Tiguidou because all the animals that we've got in this pack are like little small animals, and Tiguidou is the perfect place for little small animals, and it's kind of cozy vibes, and all the little dudes that we're getting in this pack fit so well. So we're getting the Quokka, which is what I'm starting with, what you'll have seen from the title and the thumbnail. We've got the Tasmanian Devil, we've got the Kiwi Bird, and we've got the Flying Fox, which is the exhibit animal. So I'm going to be starting off with the Quokka, and what you see me doing here, we're just next to the fallow deer habitat, actually just to the left of that path there. So I spent a bit of time playing around with the pathing. This little section that the Quokkas are going to be in, is going to, this whole kind of area is going to get filled in, I think, probably by exactly the animals that are in this DLC. So you've seen me put a little bit of a dip in there, and I've put some viewing areas in, and I put a habitat barrier around. And the thing that I kind of ended up realising, it's kind of what I've always ended up doing in Tiguidou, is that I want the habitats to be smaller than the game's requirements ask for. So yeah, the Quokkas are like tiny little animals. Basically look a little bit like rodents, but they're not. They're actually like more like a kind of marsupial type animal. They've more akin to koala bears and kangaroos and things, I think. I am actually privileged enough to have seen them in the wild. In fact, there's a couple of things in this pack that I've seen in the wild. Quokkas found in a small island called Rottnest Island off of the coast of Perth, on the west coast of Australia, but also apparently in the south west of the country as well, of Australia as well. So I've only seen them on Rottnest, and Rottnest is it's a fairly small island actually, and Perth is quite a big city, and you get a ferry out there, and then it's like these little creatures are kind of all over the place, and they are as smiley and as friendly as they look. I did look to see if I had some pictures from that trip. It was a long time ago and I didn't actually find any, but I made the decision that despite the fact that the DLC wants the requirements for the animal are that it's a grassland biome that it likes, Rottnest is definitely not a grassland biome, it's more of a temperate biome, so I decided to go with that. And so what you've seen me doing so far is putting in a little bit of it's kind of addressing two of the problems that I've just described. So I want it to be a small habitat. I want it to feel kind of cozy, fit in with Tiguidou, but I also want it to look like it's temperate and to work in this zoo. If you haven't seen this zoo before, and that would be fair enough because we haven't made an episode for a while, this is set in Canada, so it's a kind of taiga / temperate biome, and so I want these animals to be able to be outside. So I need to kind of find a bit of a middle ground, and I don't think grassland is going to work. So I've decided to go for a temperate biome. So I'm giving them this little hut. This is a reused prefab that I've had before that I've used. Where did I use this? I think I've used this as like a maintenance shed before. It's built out of the if you look at the right hand side of that building there, it's built out of one of the habitat enrichment items. I can't remember the name of it now, but it's like the floating jetty sort of thing I think it came in with the seals and stuff. So I've reused that before because it's got like a really cool wood texture. So I'm trying to blend in my kind of jankiest possible ways some of that texture. So jetty, this is the jetty piece here that I'm using, and you can see it on in the background there as well on the left there. So just trying to kind of blend this in to give the Quokkas a bit of an inside space for them to go, to be locked up at night in and that sort of thing, to go to sleep in. So there's a bit of me fiddling around with this this shelter. It's a very small space. I did actually get a question the other day in the comments from someone saying about how you cope with the camera when you're inside. It's a bit of a tricky one, especially when you're working on something this tiny. I have all my camera scroll settings turned right down. There is actually a bit of a bug that we've been seeing in the early release of this DLC. A couple of bugs actually. You'll see me struggling with it a little bit here. Is that the camera movement is not very smooth. It's slightly more jerky than usual. So that's not my camera work. It's the panning of the camera is a little bit stuttery and a bit weird. But also, and you'll notice me do this a few times, usually when you click off of you're placing an item, you don't have to click the little tick box on the gizmo to confirm that it's actually placed. You usually just can click off of the anywhere on the screen, and it will place it, and that usually works. But in this, for some reason, in this patch that we've got in the early access version of the DLC, it's a little bit more temperamental and doesn't work every time. So you'll see me place things a few times and move it and change it and do it again and mess about with it. So yeah, I thought I'd use this little new tropical door piece. There's loads of pieces in this DLC. So as well as the animals, there's all the new scenery pieces, some of which is really useful, some of which is super probably a bit too themed for me, but if you like that sort of thing, it'd be really cool. Definitely a DLC worth getting, as to be honest I think they all have been since I've played the game. So yeah, there's a few really cool little wooden pieces. There's this little slatted door piece that I'm using here, rustic piece, and then there's a bunch of things like statues and stuff like that a bit too themed for me, and then some netting which you'll see me use later. So I thought I'd make sure that they've got a little bit where the keeper can get into the shelter, can see the animals in the shelter, but doesn't have to kind of let them out through the door, because the other side of that door will be quite easy for guests to get access to and that sort of thing. So this is all locked up. So put that in, put a little bit of concrete thing down. As you see, when you see the animals, they're like super small. So this might feel really tiny, but it's actually pretty massive compared to the size of the animal that uses it. So that bit's done. Then I thought I'd reuse some of the fencing, some of the this textured fencing. I've used this a couple of times before around the deer habitat there. And again, this is an enrichment piece. It's like a really cool textured piece, but it's actually like a climbing platform that I'm using. That kind of, you see that kind of meshed like Hessian sort of frame or infill that's in the centre there. I played around with it for a while. You've seen me change the path here a couple of times. I've now settled on this dark wood path, which I've not used before, and I'm bringing back some of the theming that we had in the other bits of Tiguidou around the snow foxes and the prairie dogs and those sorts of things. So just to kind of bring it together, I thought I'd give these guys a really big open viewing window, because they're going to be kind of down below you. I do actually do some work with the terrain before we finish as well, just to raise that all up. So this is, again, like continuing this theme, the bit of the visual identity of Tiguidou. This is kind of the advantage, I think, of having like a really small zoo, is that you don't have to worry with everything being like overly themed. So there, look, you can see the first little glimpse of a quokka in that little section of the video there, but there will be some cinematics at the end, so don't worry if you're deciding, if you're umming and ahhing about whether you want to get this DLC, then do have a hang around to check out the animals at the end, because there's like the quokkas are really cool and they've got some really good animation. I have to say, I do think as the DLCs have progressed with Planet Zoo, the animations and the interactions of the animals have got so much better. It wasn't that long ago, I feel like, where it was super frustrating that a DLC, you get a new DLC, you get a new animal, you get having some new animations and things, but it was really difficult for it to actually get them to do it. These quokkas, and I think this is actually a thing of the smaller animals. The smaller animals, I think, always have slightly better. They're more interactive. They're more interesting. They do more. some of the big animals seem to sort of feel a little bit like they're on a loop, but maybe I'm biased. You'll have to let me know. Actually, do let me know what your favourite animal from this DLC is, or what you're looking forward to the most, because I'm going to probably do them all in this DLC, and in Tiguidou, but we'll be deciding on an order next. So, softening all the background off. So I'm using the same sort of stone texture that I used at the back of the tapir habitat. And I've just recoloured that all. So I've given it a bit of a mix in the colour. Just a good little tip actually there, you see me doing this, is that like try not to just go with a single colour in those sorts of things. You see that everything I'm doing in this habitat has got multiple colours. Just makes it a little bit more realistic. Don't go too far in the variation of shades, but you can see that rock work just looks a bit more realistic because I've deviated the shading on it slightly. Getting a tree in. So this is actually around about the point where I suddenly realised, I thought, having watched the quokkas jump about, I was like, they're tiny, but they actually have quite a lot of jump. So how high can they jump? I probably should look this up. There isn't a risk. Well, the game wasn't telling me that there was going to be a problem of them escaping, but it did start to feel like a couple of things started to pop into my brain. And this is usually how the creative process works for me, is my brain just gets stuck on a little thought. And I thought, well, they're quite jumpy. They could probably jump up onto this rock and then jump over that wall quite easily. But they're also tiny. So, like, are they vulnerable to birds and things flying over the top? We have got some like pretended kind of hawks up in the sky in Tiguidou. So especially when the babies come, I thought, well, we're going to have to do something about that. So you'll see how I kind of solve that problem in a minute, but I'm doing some foliage work here. I wanted to keep the actual ground texture pretty simple because, wanting to be able to, they're very small animals, so it's important for you to be able to see them as much as possible, I think, if you're a guest. So put a few bits of enrichment in. I'm putting some foliage in, and you've seen me using this elevated position here just to get a bit more detail in the foliage and stuff. A couple of different enrichment items. They're actually behaviourally quite similar to the meerkats and the prairie dog. So you can see they use that little tunnel that they go through, the hollowed out log tunnel, which I think I've got a clip in the cinematics of that. And yeah, as I said before, you'll notice on the right hand side of the screen there's lots of red marks appearing. Well, that is because I'm never too obsessive about using the right biome in terms of decoration and things for foliage for habitats, partly because I don't think zoos actually really do that very often, because things have got to grow in the habitats that they're in. So it tends to be that if a zoo is set in a particular area of the country or area of the world, they're more likely to use things that are appropriate to both the animal and to the living conditions of that environment. So the natural environment of Canada is more likely to be appropriate to temperate. And as I said, I don't think that's right. I don't think the grassland tag there, and it might get changed, but Fremantle and Rottnest Island and Perth are not grassland. They are definitely not. So yeah, we'll see. We'll see if it gets changed. And if it doesn't really matter to me too much, because I'm going to continue to use these, the things I wanted to use. And I probably will end up using the fairly similar foliage pack for the other animals as well. So that's the main bit of the habitat now finished, I think. There's some more detailing going to go on. As I said, I've got to do something about the fact that they might just be able to get eaten by birds in a minute. But we're working on this other side, so they can actually go through, the quokkas can go through underneath the path and pass back to this area where I've got the shelter and stuff, where you saw me building the shed. So had to do a little bit of adaptation. I need to actually remember to upload these to the workshop actually, because I think these build sets that I've used in Tiguidou I haven't made available to you guys, so do let me know if you would like to see those on the workshop. I probably will upload them at some point. So yeah, made that little adaptation, put in a little gate post in here just to kind of create an entrance to the section. It's also fairly similar to the one that I used. In fact, it's very similar to the one that I used in entrance to where the prairie dogs and the Arctic foxes are. So here's the tunnel going in. As you see, I've opened a bit of a space out. I've kept this really simple, just having a little narrow space. One little thing I always like to do, and I think you've probably heard me say this before, but seen me do it a couple of times as well, is that if I'm creating separated areas where the keepers can't access everywhere in the habitat, I will always try and make sure there's like an implied access for the keeper. So the keeper obviously can't pass through under that tunnel, so there's an implied gate and things that goes in on the other side. So here we are. Here's my like point of realization where I've gone, oh, they're tiny, maybe they're going to get eaten by birds. What would a zoo do about this? And so I used this new really cool netting piece that comes with this new DLC. So there's like a bunch of these pieces, and they're all kind of like cargo nets. Some of them are flat. This one's got a really cool curve to it. So I thought, well, I will create my own little netted canopy structure and that I can reuse. So you see me use this. You'll probably see me use this a few times in the next couple of habitats in Tiguidou. So just kept it pretty simple. Some support posts. It's obviously pretty lightweight structure. As I said, it's not to keep the animal out, it's to keep birds from flying into the habitat. It's not perfect, it has got some gaps, but I think this probably would be good enough to do the job to keep birds away from it. So yeah, just done some little loops with the rope, and here you can see me putting it in. And I deliberately kind of kept it fairly rustic. I had a bit of a challenge getting it in, obviously, because I thought about it as a second thought, but it did actually kind of work out okay. So I've put one in there. I need some way of anchoring those to the ground. And then there's a second one going in here, and it sort of loops over the top into the guest area a bit, which I kind of don't mind. In fact, I thought about doing that a bit more. At one point I had netting going right over the pathway as well. I might do that again as this area develops, because sometimes it feels like it gives you a bit of a kind of inside outside experience for guests, so that blurs the gap between the habitat and the guest areas. So yeah, these posts needed some support, and again, this is another piece that's in the new DLC. These like driftwood pieces are really cool, great for they've actually in some of the cinematics and stuff that we've seen for the trailers and things, they've used these driftwood pieces to build these like really cool Polynesian structures and things to give you a kind of new like aesthetic that you can have. Again, that's probably a little bit too themed. That's always the trouble with some of these highly themed pieces. If you're trying to go for a kind of semi-realistic zoo, which is what I'm always trying to do, I don't know if the really, really super themed pieces work. This is the last little bit before this finishes. That was supposed to be hot wire, so that was me going, I don't want the quokkas to actually even get up on that ledge. And then finally, I realised that they can climb. Not only can they jump, but they can climb. So I had to go around and make sure all of these tree structures and the posts and things were all given these supposed to be kind of implied blockers to stop the animals from climbing up and out and over the edge of the habitat, because they're little cheeky things and they probably would do that. So there's some little bits and pieces you see me doing, protecting it. The habitat is really starting to come to life now. And then I had to finish off that idea of like, well, I've got this other section, again, partly because I want the guest facing part of the habitat to actually feel quite cozy and small, but I don't want to massively go underneath the requirements for space and stuff that the game gives you. I have done that. It is too small for the number of quokkas that I have in there, but personally, again, I still think that I think the game is too generous in the sizes that it gives the animals. Maybe I'm a terrible person by saying that, but I actually feel like they end up with quite a lot of space, and I feel like if you saw quokkas in an actual zoo, they would have this amount of space. So actually half the habitat ends up being, I mean, it's not entirely not guest facing, it's just not purposefully made to be guest facing. There is a way that the guests can see into this area, it's just bad viewing. So putting a fence around this, reusing some of the pieces that I've used before, again to keep the theming consistent in Tiguidou. Putting this fence round, and you'll see it's kind of like, you know, pretty straightforward. There's a big gap underneath it at the moment, so that's all going to get filled in a sec. And this is all using, you know, just timber pieces. Again, they could climb this and stuff, and that there's still got the same problem that birds could drop down over the top of it. But because this is slightly less guest facing, this can be a little bit less aesthetically pleasing, a little bit less money spent on budget and those sorts of things. So this is going to get, in fact, very similar to the way that we did the habitat for the red foxes. This is all just going to get like a mesh roof over it. Putting a few silver birches in, again, just trying to keep the biome and the identity of Tiguidou going, because I've used a lot of those silver birches, and obviously there's the evergreen trees and that sort of thing. There's a little dude, you can see him coming out of his tunnel, and you can get up to the shelter and stuff there. So yeah, and then I needed to put a mesh over the top of it, so just some structure to that. Nothing too complicated in this really. And you can see we're right alongside the river here, so that was also conscious effort. Try not to do too much that disturbs the stream, so that people's view from the bridge as they're coming out of the wetlands house isn't obstructed too much. All of this, if you haven't seen these before, so these are like, as I said, I haven't made an episode of Tiguidou for a while, but it's episode 25. So there's a whole bunch of episodes on my channel if you want to see the rest of the context. I won't be doing, I sort of made a bit of a decision recently, I won't be making tours of these new areas until they're a bit more complete. So you'll probably get, like I'm doing in Zimbar, a few build episodes of the same area, and then there'll be like a more detailed tour. So we tour kind of several sections together, giving them a bit more foliage and stuff back here. So again, breaking all the rules. You can see the red the red items appearing as I add more. And again, I think most of this is okay. It's just the fact that it's temperate, and it doesn't like the fact that it's temperate. Ironically, grass isn't always in the grassland biome for some reason, but hey ho. So yeah, a little bit of detailing more, and as I say, you can see that there's my kind of implied keeper access into this backstage area, and the guests can see in there, but it's not dressed. Putting some flowers in because just, you know, a bit of periwinkle always goes a treat for a bit of ground coverage, and that's a good tip for just breaking up the texture of the ground. Things like the periwinkle are great, and there's a couple of new things in the new DLC actually that are quite good for that as well. Some good ground clutter. So yeah, and then I've just thought, well, I'll make this like little kind of nice looking area, and then put some steps in for the keeper to get across this. As I said, it's all implied. There's no gate there. The gate is actually hidden in the main section of the habitat, so you won't see the keepers going in and out of this door at any point. But I thought this was a nice little detail, just this little like brick, sort of super simple, keeping it really rusticy and aesthetically pleasing. So there's going to be a few little cinematics, guys, but that is going to be it. This is definitely a DLC worth checking out. Thank you very much to Frontier for the early access as ever. Super awesome of those guys. And do definitely check this DLC out. I'm going to leave you with this like few minutes of the cinematics. Enjoy the cuteness. My name is Toves, and I will catch you on the next one. Take it easy.